All right. It's a Friday. It's rainy. I am on my way to pick up my daughter at her workplace. It's been an interesting couple of days. Yesterday, I was at work in Greensboro and I went out to lunch, and I noticed when I went to lock my car with the key fob that the beep didn't happen. You know, the beep beep. The beep you're supposed to hear. There was no beep, man. So I didn't really think much of it. I went inside, got my food, came back out, drove back to the office, and again it wouldn't beep. So I was like, what's happened to the car? Is the alarm, could the alarm possibly have been disabled by somebody? Like, you know, Jessica's car not too long ago was almost stolen. So I thought maybe something's happened to it. And so I went and reviewed the camera footage. We had this one little camera that we put in about 2 weeks ago that points out in the parking lot of where we live, and sure enough, 12:21 in the morning, this white SUV looked to me like a Jeep Commander. It pulled in and then it backed into my car at 12:23. Actually, since I'm fooling around with video editing, maybe I'll just try to put a clip of that in here so I can remember it for all time, because it was interesting. The weird thing about it was he didn't like seem to be accelerating at all. It was almost as if his car was in neutral and he was just drifting into mine. And you know, so it was kind of strange, being that he was only parked for about 2 minutes before that happened. And then after he hit the car, he drove away. That explains why my car alarm didn't work. And then he came back at like 12:49. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get his license plate from the video footage I had. And they didn't capture it. The security cameras at the front office didn't capture the license plate. So it's a hit and run. The front of my car's got some damage. And I guess some Monday I'm supposed to turn it into a collision shop, and their insurance is going to pay for a rental for me to get to work. So that's cool. Yeah, other than that, this week's been interesting. I think for the first time since I started this new job, I've had moments this week where, like yesterday, where I was just caught up. I just didn't have a lot to do, and I really like that. I was able to get a bunch of training done. Just feels like so much, I don't know, it's just, you know how it is when you have a deadline hanging over your head, or just feeling the pressure of work, you know. Just don't feel that at all. Maybe it's a combination of having, you know, learned the job and feeling more confident about how long it takes to do things. And it's been just over 6 months that I've been there, so that's been nice. One of the trainings I took was about self-harm, not non-suicidal self-injury, I think, because they use the abbreviation NSSI. And I've actually engaged in that behavior once or twice in my life. I've cut myself before. I think the first time I might have been 15 or 16, and it was right on the heels of family chaos, my dad being abusive. And I've done it, I think, twice since I was married. So not a history of it or anything, just I've done it before. And it's always been in moments of just extreme emotional distress. But anyway, the class mentioned this case study about a woman who, you know, so they give these little examples so you know what to look for, of a woman who really has it all together. She's in mid-level management, and people come to her for advice. You know, she's just known as being a sage and a wise lady and a counselor, and people rely on her. But when she goes home, you know, the difference between her public and private personae, whatever the word is, is starkly different, because she goes home and she just loses herself in TV, and she doesn't think, and time goes by and she's unaware of it. And she learned early on, because she grew up in a household where she wasn't allowed to express emotions, she learned that pain helps her relieve her emotional distress. Okay, so it's something I got. But the thing that actually I saw and never considered before was the way this little article in this case study is describing how she lost herself in television, how she would watch TV for hours and not pay attention to the time that was going by. And that struck a chord. Something inside me said, I know what that's like. And I had never really considered before the fact that entertainment habits could be directly related to trauma, or like a response to trauma. But of course, like, as I sat and thought about my history, I was like, of course that's true. I would watch TV, and there were certain programs that I felt there's no rhyme or reason to it, but for example, I was obsessed with Vanna White. Okay, so this is like 40 years ago, and I was watching Wheel of Fortune, and Vanna White was beautiful, and I noticed it. And I would actively, and I remember doing this, I would fantasize about her. And I was a kid, so it wasn't anything, negative or, sexual. It was more about the idea of riding my bike to California, because I knew she lived in California, and just showing up there and living with her, and like I said, there was nothing sexual about it. It was just like this person, like I was just enthralled with her and what life would be like with her, and I just imagined all the ways that it would be different than what I knew. And then I realized, I have a strong reaction to Anne of Green Gables, the original PBS 1987 version, which is hard to find now for some reason. But I was so emotionally attached to that program and the characters in it, especially, the idea, just the way things were, the simpler life, and the sense of belonging in that community. And there was other things, it could have been any show. It could have been The Waltons or Little House on the Prairie or whatever. But I realized, I did. Kids Incorporated was another big one. That was on in like 87, 89. I would have been maybe 13, 14, somewhere in that range. But I had this big crush on Martika, the girl that wrote Toy Soldiers. But I mean, it was that kind of a thing. I was so immersed in this world. Another one was the Gospel Bill Show, which was a Christian program about a guy named Gospel Bill in this community called Dry Gulch. And just, these are all examples of shows from my personal life and my childhood that I just remember having such a strong affinity for. And since then in my life, when I get into emotional trouble, when I get into serious, the whole time I was depressed in 2022, I consume TV, and it's an escape. It's also, but it's like mindless. So the word amusement, of course, means lack of thinking, and I know exactly what that is. To be amused is to not think. Is to not muse. And it's just, I never thought of it that way. I'm not, I've had lots of times in my life when I beat myself up and I said, I'm watching too much TV, and I heard preachers rail against television, and etc., etc. And as usual, the simple-minded miss the whole point. It never occurred to me that TV was not just something I was doing because I was bad and horrible. It was something I was doing because life was bad and horrible, and the people that I was supposed to be able to rely on, i.e. my parents, were not there. and they had their own issues, and nobody was minding the store. So I don't know, it just gave me kind of a fresh perspective, and it made me think about the clients that I see, the people who are using drugs and this and that. You know, people don't stop using heroin because Steve or anyone else comes along, or even the legal system comes along and says, hey, you know, you should quit doing heroin, or even their family members. There has to be an alternative that they see and that they're convinced of. And when they can see that and they're convinced of it, then there's the possibility that there's a change. Then the person can make a decision to change. But yeah, it just kind of opened my eyes to something I'd really never thought of before. So I thought I'd share that on here. And I'll keep this updated as to what happens next with my car and everything. See you next time.